All right, guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Charlie McGrath on this 29th day of April, Monday. I want to thank Gary Hendershot for his alternative energy hour that he brings to us every Monday. If you want to hear more Gary Hendershot, Smart Scarecrow, or guys who have invented ways to create electricity out of rubbing two Mexican jumping beans together, you can listen to his program Monday nights at 5 o'clock West, 8 o'clock East, or you can go to any search engine, put in The Smart Scarecrow. That'll take you to his website. He hosts a program over there on Justin TV every Thursday for several hours. So if you haven't got enough Gary, then you can go there and get your fill on alternative energy. I want to thank everybody for understanding. Last Thursday I had to take that night off, and I know I've been gone quite a bit as of late, but hopefully that's all turned the corner now. So thank you for understanding that. All right, bringing up our guest now. Matt Weidner has been an advocate, a staunch advocate for foreclosure fraud and people who've been fraudulently foreclosed on. He's also been a guest host on this program, does a great job every time he's on here. And I know we're going to go down, talk about foreclosure, the decline in our economy, and this will probably dominate this hour's conversation. But I do want to just start with a real quick commentary. You know, as I'm perusing the headlines this morning, pulling things to put on our website, Wide Awake News. By the way, if you're not one of the 50 or so in the chat room right now, 51 to be exact, and you want to join the folks there, you can go to wideawakenews.com, click on the Wide Awake radio microphone on the right-hand side. That will take you into the chat room. If you want to be one of the 46 watching on Justin TV, you can go to that same chat room. There's a link there for it as well. Sign up for the newsletter. If you already have signed up for it and you haven't got it for a few days, we lost you when we did our transfer, so sign up again. If you haven't signed up for it before, sign up for it. All right, let me continue with the commentary here. I'm looking through headlines this morning, and the first thing I see on Drudge is Putin shaking Obama's hand, talking about, you know, the topic is Al-Qaeda threatens to gain control of chemical weapons in Syria. And it just immediately enraged me, and it immediately took me to a place where I wanted to crank out a video, and I did. It's posting. It'll be posted after the program tonight. Look, more meat grinder, more lies, more deceit, more promising of spreading freedom and liberty around the world, when all we are doing is creating our own worst nightmare. This is all that's happening. You know, we have President Obama, we have Lindsey Graham, we have John McCain talking about Assad's got to go and freedom needs to have a chance to flourish. You know, it was just in August of last year. I still remember the interview because it's burned into my head, where there was McCain and Graham sitting there being interviewed by Fox News, talking about the immediate need for arming the Syrian freedom-fighting rebels. Is it a shock to anybody when New York Times come out with the story today talking about there is no freedom-fighting rebels? There is no organic purple finger revolution happening inside of Syria. So who's running the show in Syria? Who's this opposition force? Well, according to the New York Times and multiple other sources, it's a group called the Al-Nusra Front. Well, who's the Al-Nusra Front? These must be freedom-loving individuals that are trying to implement some kind of Western-style democracy in Syria. Nope. Sorry. Even our own State Department says Al-Nusra Front is an alias for Al-Qaeda. Al-Nusra Front, synonym Al-Qaeda. We've been sending for years, over 2 years now, the U.S., UK, France, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, billions of dollars of money we don't have in order to fund freedom fighters that are not freedom fighters. They're the same enemies. A lot of us have loved ones who have been butchered or maimed, and we know millions of people around this world have been butchered and maimed by this enemy that that's been pounded into our head over the last decade, Al-Qaeda. We are funding the institutions that we are supposed to be terrified of, the ones that are going to come over here and steal our rights, the ones that are responsible for all the woes of the world. Billions of dollars and tons of military equipment we've shoveled into these folks. It isn't a freedom-fighting, liberty-loving group. It is people that are being dominated by foreign fighters, not even Syrian. These are foreign fighters, the same people that we will be turning around, mark my words, guaranteed, we will be turning around and invading to kick them out of power. Because the president's even telling us today, Al-Qaeda is about to get chemical weapons out of Syria. Well, of course they are. They have the best military equipment money can buy. It's ours. They have funding till from now till forever. They control the oil fields of Syria now, thanks to us. It's a damn shame and an infuriating lie that the people of this country and the world are buying into. We need to realize we're not being led to some kind of glorious victory over tyrannical terrorism. No, we're doing exactly the opposite. We're making terrorism possible. We're making it possible. We're funding it. And it is going to be blowback that comes back and attacks this nation. It's a sickening development in a sickening situation that needs to come to an end. If you look at Washington, D.C., you're going to have, like I said before, these war hawks, these people that somehow, it almost seems that they have this lustful desire to see more and more blood. When you have McCain and Graham sitting there talking about it, you're not going to get the straight answers from D.C., and you're certainly not going to get it from establishment media. You got to look into this yourself and realize where we are. If you want to look to a politician that might be telling you the truth, I would have said, the Paul family, but that's been blown by the wayside. I would say Dennis Kucinich, because he's the only one at this whole deal that I believe has it right when he tweets the other day, if you want to know what's happening inside of Syria, all you need to do is go to Google, type in Syria, false flag, chemical weapons. That will tell you everything you want to know about what's happening inside of Syria. This is the path we are on, folks, and it's not going to change unless we change it. All right, Matt Weidner, welcome to the program. It's great to have you back on here. I know that's kind of not really going to be on the topic of tonight's programming, although I know you are a student of independent media and tyrannical government and actions that are being taken in our name. So I'm sure that you would probably agree with some of what I was saying there.
Absolutely. In fact, I'd pick up right where you just left off right there and tell you that what really got my attention this morning was the reporting that Ahmed Karzai from Afghanistan reports on hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars that the United States government gave to Afghanistan and the warlords in Afghanistan. And, as I do my job every day trying to keep Americans in their homes, it burns me to know that literally hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash were shoved into duffel bags and delivered to warlords in Afghanistan. This is not fantasy. I live here in the Tampa Bay area, and I know some of the individuals that were making those deliveries of the cash. They actually repeated that to me many, many years ago, and frankly, I found it a bit extraordinary. But now we have absolute reporting of it, that our money, our taxpayer dollars, are being handed away to warlords all across the world.
And at the same exact time, you go to work every day looking at folks in Florida and I'm presuming elsewhere that are losing everything. Their home is being yanked away from them. They're being basically having home invasions, legal home invasions, while we are, like you said, shoved. That isn't even remotely conspiratorial. That's an absolute fact. The CIA has they have no budget. They can do whatever they want. They can print. They can take money. They can sell drugs in one place. They get money for this event over here, or just outright print it. It is completely and totally corrupt. This is what in my opinion, this is what Rome would look like in the very decadent days before the Roman Empire crumbled. Just so much hubris, so much notion that we can do anything we want and it doesn't matter because we are the great fill in the blank.
Yeah, the really terrifying thing, I think, is as I interact with consumers who, as you indicate, are in danger of losing the very fundamentals of their lives, being thrown out into the street because they've lost a job, they can't afford to eat, and they encounter a court system which in our elementary school or junior high days was supposed to protect all of us. What they're seeing now is the court systems, even at the local level, doing the job of the corporations and business. And that's a very scary thing because increasingly individuals down here at the ground level recognize they can't look to their government to protect them anymore. And it goes further than that. It's not just that we can't count on our government to protect us. We're afraid that government's acting against us. That's
absolutely. We'll pick it up there when we come back. Matt Weidner, thank you. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'll give your websites out when we come back on the next side of this program. Or next after this break. I'm all over the place. All right, guys, we'll be right back. Hang tight. All right, guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Charlie McGrath on this 29th day of April, Monday. I want to apologize to the folks in Justin TV, if you're listening on Justin TV, you hear the conversation go into the break. If it's a topic that either myself or the guest do not want to talk about on air, Gary shuts that down. And if it's a topic that we didn't know was going to come up, Gary will shut down that audio. Only because a lot of times our guests don't know that we're commercial break, but we're still being heard. So I apologize if anybody is like, "What the heck's going on? Why is this feed cut?" Well, that's the reason why. There's no solutions to saving the world in these conversations, but in some of them they're just a bit private. So that's why we do that. Matt Weidner, before the break, you were talking about the notion of people turning to government for help is not only a fanciful notion, and we're kind of being trained to believe that that's the truth with hundreds of millions of people, over 50% of the nation, in fact, receiving some form of government check or another in a lot of cases, 50 million cases anyway, to put food on the table. But truly, that isn't serving the people. When the original notion of government was to have a fair playing field, at least to establish and keep a fair playing field, so that the uber elite and the powerful, wealthy, powerful cabals couldn't dominate governance and in fact turn a nation of individuals into a nation of serfs. But people who turn to the government for help now, that is what they're going to find. If they're looking for real help in saving their wealth or saving their home or saving their property, they're not going to get this from government. In fact, they're going to get the opposite. They're going to get the enforcer of corporate dictates, corporate mandates, and in a lot of cases, they're going to lose everything. Correct?
That's absolutely correct, and the best example of that in the space of foreclosure and homes and mortgages are the two settlements that were released between all of the banks and announced the Office of Comptroller and Currency and the 49 state attorneys general. Now, consumers all across the country are receiving checks as part of these settlement deals, checks that are typically in the amount of $300. Now, that's the one side of the story. The other side of the story is the consultants closely affiliated with the banks and with the government that were part of the settlement. They pocketed billions of dollars. For every check that goes out to a consumer for just a couple $100, we've got consultants on the other side of it who are shoving billions of dollars into their pocket. Charlie, I was in New York City a few months ago when, of course, GMAC Lending went bankrupt, and there's a big bankruptcy court meeting up there. And I'm sitting in a courtroom right near the ruins of the World Trade Center, and in that courtroom are shoved hundreds of attorneys and accountants and other consultants. And they were making a petition to be paid fees as part of that bankruptcy petition. And it blew my mind to know that they were talking about fees of $250 million. That's with a B. And so while GMAC Lending was in bankruptcy and while consumers all across the country are struggling, the attorneys and the consultants and the accountants that are up there are asking the court to pay them $250 million. So it's just terrifying to see what happens when government gets involved in this business, and to consumers reaching out to government saying, "Hey, help me out with this. Be some balance against the corporatism." Government isn't that force anymore. It's working with the corporations.
No doubt. It's actually, I think it'd be fair to say it's owned by the corporations. This incestuous relationship, this open door policy, especially in the financial institutions, between high positions of power in Treasury, right out of Wall Street. I mean, $300 checks to individuals, while you have, the people that actually write the legislation or that promote the practices of corporate interest are getting billions and billions. And Jane and John, homeowner, who have been fraudulently foreclosed on, or fraud has been committed onto them in one form or another, is going to get $300. I mean, it's sick, but unfortunately, it isn't going to change. In fact, it's probably going to get worse, is it not?
It's absolutely going to get worse. Here in the state of Florida, I see more and more foreclosures being filed every day. I see judges, unfortunately.
Matt, I don't know if you moved a little bit, but your audio kind of got a little bit wonky there.
How's that? Is that a little bit better?
That is better. Yep.
Okay. So, yeah, more and more foreclosures filed every day. An economic circumstance that in the general sense is getting much worse. I don't know if you had a chance to watch that Frontline special called The Retirement Gamble. And if you haven't, I really encourage you to watch it. Again, here we've got good, independent journalism talking about all the millions of Americans out there who have entrusted their entire retirement savings into 401k plans. And what this special did, again, it's on Frontline PBS, called The Retirement Gamble. And what this episode did was talked about how even the returns that all these mainstream investment vehicles and houses are reporting, if you take away the fees that they're capturing from that, you're talking about a net zero return on your money. And people don't like to think about that. Those that are in the mainstream investing world that are with their stock markets and 401ks, they think they're putting money in their pocket. They're not. It's being shoved in the pocket of the banks and institutions. And
when we come back, we'll talk about how even in a lot of these investment schemes, that even the base asset is grossly misaccounted for. We'll be back with Matt Weidner, more Wide Awake News Radio. Hang tight. Welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Matt Weidner, attorney Matt Weidner, is our guest, and I am going to give you his website right now. I think this is the right one. MattWeidnerLaw.com. I'll put this into the chat room right now. Matt Weidner's Foreclosure News is what's up on the first screen there. It looks like you've changed this up just a little bit since the last time I was on here. How's the traffic going over there? I'm hoping that more and more people are taking advantage of the information you put up here.
Absolutely, because it's a larger message of consumer justice generally. We focus on foreclosures, but we also focus on the banks and institutions breaking the laws in order to enforce the debts against consumers. And one of the things that people need to understand is that too many people just lay down and give it to the banks easy, whether they're collecting on credit cards or home foreclosures. There's a lot of negative comments about attorneys, and a lot of those comments are justified. But what consumers need to understand is that we still own our courtrooms, and I encourage people to get inside their courtrooms, especially on debt collection or foreclosure issues, but family law or anything else. One of the last vestiges of independence that we have is the ability for consumers to get into courtrooms and defend themselves and sue companies, whether it's the electric company or cable or anything else. It's just do your own research, get in that courtroom and defend yourself.
Yeah, no doubt. And we were talking during the break a little bit about this, as far as foreclosure goes, if that is your practice, just looking, from the fact that you're an attorney and you're in that field, there's going to be no end. I mean, you have a 40-year career ahead of you still.
Because unfortunately, things have just gotten worse.
Yeah, and we're building the next bubble. This is what we were talking about in the break. Right now, I told you that I was just in a region of the country that was one of the hardest hit by the housing market collapse, and they're starting to see life again in the housing market, and it is 100% the exact same playbook that led us into the problem in the first place, which is subprime loans, which is people being able to buy homes, quickly appreciating value, flipping them, 2% interest rate, 3% interest rate on a 30-year. The difference is when this one goes, the legislation, Dodd-Frank, all these things that could have been done before this next bubble is allowed to be inflated. The things that could have been done, simply reinstating Glass-Steagall, making it illegal for a bank holding company to be a bank investment company, getting rid of some of these exotic investment vehicles that these institutions use. None of this has been done. None of it's been done. The only thing that's guaranteed to happen is these institutions have no risk whatsoever because of the moral hazard of bailing them out in the first place. They're going to keep doing it, and when it pops this time, we're going to see the government saying it's time to bail in, not out, bail in, which will mean what we were talking about earlier. You think you're safe in your 401k, you think you're safe in this retirement gamble, but the reality is another bubble is going to go, and when this one goes, they're going to say, well, it's going to come out of your stockholders, it's going to come out of depositors. This is what's happened. It's happening in Europe right now, and it will happen here. Do you think so, Matt, or am I off track?
Well, You're apparently off the track because all of the mainstream news are reporting that things are better than ever before. But, no, I certainly share your analysis. While the mainstream news is reporting record stock market gains, and certainly if you look all across Florida and frankly in most parts of the country, you're seeing gains in real estate. But the fundamental disconnect is I don't see the job foundation making pace with the increases that we see all around us. So once again, I think we're blowing up a bubble, and I fear that you're correct that the consequences this time around will be much worse than before.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, we don't have to think that. We know it. I mean, because when the housing bubble blew last time, we had about 20 million people that were on food stamps. Now it's nearly 50 million. We had about $8 trillion in sovereign debt. Now it's pushing 17 trillion. We had to ask government before we just went ahead and blindly gave out bailout cash to these too big to fail institutions. Now it's law. I mean, now it's just established that this is what's going to happen. We've lost millions and millions of jobs since 2008. So, yeah, I mean, we don't have to think that it's going to be worse. We know it's going to be worse because the baseline is a lot worse than it was then. So, yeah, unfortunately, there's going to be plenty of work for you and your firm going into the future, and more suffering people in this country as we continue to be told by the establishment media that everything's A-OK fine. I want to pick your brain a little bit, and I know I didn't ask you about this, but it just popped into my head. When you're talking about not being able to turn to government because they're not there to help. They're there to support the people that fund them, which it isn't the taxpayer, it's these corporate special interests. When you said that, the first thing that popped into my head was government in Boston on the backside of the Boston Marathon bombing, shutting down the city. What was your take on the reaction of so-called law enforcement when they put a city under basically martial law for one 19-year-old punk who had no military training or was no more dangerous than the rapist murderers that are on the loose in Boston every single day? Was it a little bit shocking to you to see the overreaction by government?
At first, like most Americans, you're sort of cheering on the good guys, right? The ones riding in on the horses that are to save the Bostonians and go and get the bad guy. But then, yeah, you're right. You wake up pretty clearly after that hangover and go, hold on just a second. I'm seeing these pictures now of law enforcement going door to door with rifles. And let's be clear about this. They've crossed the line from being just plain law enforcement to being paramilitary forces. When you see these heavy artillery vehicles moving through the streets, when you see these guys outfitted like that, and you see them going door to door, kicking down doors and breaking down doors, breaking into homes. It truly is a terrifying thing. And again, as you indicate, this is one guy, one 19-year-old kid. What happens when something more real, a real security threat happens, where we have more cells all across the country that the government's trying to track down? To see how quickly they were able to institute a direct example of martial law. I mean, there was never even a formal declaration of martial law, and yet you have enforcement, these paramilitary forces going door to door. Not any different than what I presume was happening in Nazi Germany, as the brown shirts went door to door, kicking down doors and throwing people into the street. Here we saw it happening in America. The difference is we had people standing out there cheering them on. It's terrifying.
Yeah, and it was basically celebrated after the fact. The quick reaction of Joint Terrorism Task Force, but yeah, I mean, even the brown shirts, right, in Nazi Germany, or even the folks that were under obeying Stalin's commands, killing millions of people. They always spun it in a patriotic script, right? So because generally people are not going to go commit these kind of tyrannical actions unless they believe it's for a cause that they could get behind, and it was terrifying to me. And I'm not trying to minimize the people that were killed and injured in that attack. I will say there's a whole lot of questions that just do not that have not been answered by government or press on the backgrounds of these guys and how long the FBI was watching them and how they could go through this even though they were on this secret watch list and that kind of thing. But I'm not trying to minimize the deaths that occurred and the people that were maimed. But the reaction was is horrifying to me as the event.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Two elements there let's touch on. First of all, I think what's most significant is the number of quote-unquote normal Americans. It's merging into mainstream thought where normal everyday Americans are now thinking, wait a minute, is there something deeper and more sinister going on there? I hear all these reports of, it's a false flag event, or there are actors that portrayed all these things. And, that's a terrifying thing to think about. Not just that they're actors potentially, but the fact that more and more Americans, their first impulse is that this is my government that's actually not only not helping us, but is doing that to us. And that truly is something that's a bridge that we've crossed now.
I couldn't agree with you more. When Dennis Kucinich, talking on Syria now, talking about the chemical weapons and the threat, when Kucinich comes on and says, if you really want to know what's going on, type in false flag, Syria chemical weapons. That should be a wake-up call, right, to people who think that this is fringe, that independent media is just fringe. We're going to be back with Matt Weidner, more Wide Awake News Radio in just a sec. Hang tight. Welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio, final segment on this 29th day of April, Tuesday. Matt Weidner is our guest. His website is Matt Weidner, W-E-I-D-N-E-R, mattweidnerlaw.com. Go there, bookmark it. He's putting up all kinds of information there. And like he said, not just on foreclosure, but on injustice in general. And speaking of outright tyrannical injustice, you turned me on to this story. Safeguard Properties internal documents reveal rampant complaints of theft and break-in. As Gary pointed out, we have about 10 minutes or so left. Who is Safeguard Properties, and what are they doing? What is this story about?
So Safeguard is one of a handful of companies that contract all around the country to monitor, inspect, and, as the reporting indicates, break into homes all across the country. What Americans need to understand is that when you have a mortgage on your house, the banking industry has taken the position that because you've given them a mortgage on the house, you have also given them the right to kick down your door and break into your property without law enforcement, without a court order. And I want people to Google this article that's in Huffington Post. It's Safeguard Properties and then internal documents. If you just Google that, you will find out that this is not conspiracy theory. These are actual reports of events that are occurring in communities all across this country. The banks, who are hired by Fannie and Freddie, largely the government institutions, working with these private contractor companies, are actually going door to door in neighborhoods all across the country, and when they want to, they're breaking down the door. They're taking people's property, even if you're living in the house. So again, that's a very, very scary phenomenon that's happening way too frequently, and unfortunately, law enforcement and our court system just won't do anything at all about it.
Yeah, I'm skimming through the article right now. So are they doing this once the foreclosure process is started, or is it? I mean, obviously, if you're saying with no court order, it isn't. They haven't been removed from the property.
All of the above. I mean, I've litigated cases where people are not even in foreclosure. What you have to understand is that Fannie Mae has released a directive that the servicers are supposed to inspect property when you're 45 days late on your payment. So not when you're in foreclosure, but when you are 45 days late on your payment, the federal government is directing these contractors to go and inspect your property. When they come out to inspect your property because you're a few days late on your payment, if they, the contractors, determine that it's vacant, or if they want to go inside the house, they're breaking down the doors and going inside the homes.
Unbelievable. So 45 days late. That isn't very late. I mean,
Not at all. And again, you have absolutely no indication of this. I've represented clients who were not in foreclosure at all, had absolutely no idea this was happening, and they get phone calls from their neighbors indicating that all their stuff has been moved out into the street, or worse, that the contractors were selling their stuff out on the street. So how'd you like that? You're 45 days late on your mortgage, and you get a call from your neighbor telling you all your things are being sold out on the side of the street. It's happening in communities all across the country. Terrifying.
I know at least 10 families that have went through refinancing process with a bank, and in a lot of cases, in some cases, they stop paying on their mortgage in order to facilitate a negotiation in refinancing a mortgage, getting a lower interest rate or some of the principal removed. And 45 days late is nothing. I mean, it's absolutely nothing. That is shocking that people would show up and want to kick in your door to inspect this property. You're saying this is Freddie and Fannie issuing this directive. Well, we need to understand that Freddie and Fannie, what is it, 90+% of mortgages written now today end up being owned by Freddie and Fannie. So this is Gestapo police tactics: pay up, or we're going to send the goons to take your stuff.
Is exactly right, and that's what this is about. The cover is that they're there to inspect the property, but the reality is this is thug debt collecting. And one of the most unfortunate things is when you try and bring cases into circuit courts and civil courts all across the country, it's very scary because there's just not a mechanism to really punish these corporations for doing what they're doing. The comments in the story is always, I hope they're going to sue them, or could the consumer shoot them when they came inside their house? And unfortunately, unless you've got a well-founded reason, of course you shouldn't discharge a firearm under any circumstances, but the reality is, not surprisingly, the corporations have insulated themselves, and therefore they're able to get away with doing this over and over again, and you certainly wouldn't want to be part of any confrontation with them. So unfortunately, they're just going to continue to get away with it.
Has there been any violence that you're aware of yet, or are they just waiting until nobody's home and then taking stuff?
Well, I'm aware of many altercations. I'm not aware of any direct confrontation that resulted in bloodshed.
Yeah, I can imagine it going there pretty quick.
That's exactly correct.
Unbelievable. And like I said, unfortunately, this isn't going away. I mean, the days of Matt. Do you remember when the housing bubble burst? Right in 2006, 7, 8. And when we really went off the cliff, at least we were told we went off the cliff so we could sign away our sovereignty over to corporations and give them unlimited power. At that point in time, it was sure a kinder, gentler government, wasn't it? Saying, well, we're going to do everything we can to help, and this is inevitable, at least in my opinion, probably yours as well, that it was going to end up in a place like this.
Yeah, I always say that George Bush wrote the check. He left it in the belly drawer, and when Obama came in, he cashed it. That's what happened after the financial crisis of 2008. And yeah, I want you to think back to what our government looked like then. It was a much kinder and gentler government. But look at local law enforcement now that are really paramilitary forces, and you think about all the weapons that have been purchased since 2008, and you really have to question, what was the need for law enforcement all across this country to buy these billions of rounds of ammunition and all these heavy artillery vehicles that are prowling the streets all across the country? Why is it that they're out there right now? Clearly it's because they know, as you predict, and I unfortunately think you're correct, when things go down again, it's going to be much worse than before in 2008. That's truly terrifying.
It is, and I see the DOJ is actually doing it, or at least paying lip service, because there's been a few congressmen who've asked what the hell's going on with DHS and this insane amount of purchasing of ammunition. But I just glimpsed at an article before the program. DOJ is looking into it, which there's no faith given there. But no doubt about it. I mean, there has been a build out in the last 4 years that is staggering. It's absolutely mind blowing. When you think about the potential for 30,000 drones, when you think about the fusion centers, when you think about the ammunition and the weaponry being given to local law enforcement, and the local law enforcement that basically are serving as federal police officers because they have taken the bribe in a lot of cases for funding to get this kind of thing. You don't have to be a genius. You just have to realize that this isn't all being done for fun and games. They're not doing this because of a couple of would-be bombers in Boston, or because they're afraid of Ahmadinejad coming over here and taking your freedom. They're doing this because they understand that it's going to hit the fan. 2008 was a staged event in order to make sure that those in the know, those in the positions of power, could jockey their positions around so that when it all did hit the fan, they were standing high above the fray, and we will be in amongst the fray.
Unfortunately, think about what happens when the power turns off or when food becomes a little bit hard to get. It's truly going to be survival of the fittest for all of us. No doubt about it. All right, what do you got coming up? We got about 3 minutes left. What are you working on now? What's I'm glad you asked that. Listen, foreclosure defense is something we're still really working on, but we've got a lot of actions that we're taking in state and even federal court to pursue the banks and these creditors that are harassing Americans. We're going back to the organic law, to some really basic stuff, and hitting them, not on large-scale actions with class actions or anything like that, but really taking what's happening to individual consumers on a day-to-day basis and hitting them one by one with these little small suits. We're hoping to bring down some of these big banks and institutions with some smaller suits, and to share with consumers all across the country the way you can do it yourself. So, just stay tuned to the website, and keep in mind that you got to stand up for yourself. And what I'll do on the website is give consumers out there all across the country some tools that they would need to go in and be their own attorneys in courtrooms, suing the banks and the credit card companies and everybody else.
Are you seeing more? Are you seeing a banking elite, at least in these big institutions, that are becoming more brazen and more hubris and more, I don't give a crap, you're going to do it my way or that's it?
Oh, there's no question. One of the direct results of the settlements that the banks entered into with our attorneys general from all across the country is, once those settlements were inked and once they paid a few $1 billion in settlement money or fines, they became far more aggressive towards the individual consumer. And so those settlements just resulted in taking the gloves off and then being able to take their hands and squeeze them around the necks of consumers. Truly terrifying, but it's a thing that individuals need to start fighting back. Don't rely on attorneys. Certainly don't wait on a court system. Start fighting back individually, filing suits against the banks, and stop using the banks in general. A lot of communities focusing back on one another and removing yourself from the consumerist system entirely.
Yeah, what is your, about a minute or so left here. We talked a little bit during the break about, this bubble being blown up and it's going to be far worse. Any indication from the circles you run in on how long this fantasy of recovery is going to continue on, or do you think this is something we can keep doing for a decade?
I think it's kind of like the coming of Christ. We're not going to know it until he actually comes, and certainly lots are predicting the bubble continues on forever, and I don't think we're going to know the false event or the real bubble that's going to burst until it actually comes. Just prepare for it now and get ready for it. Yeah,
and that's what I look for as well is, these people that are in the know, these power people that know that there's something coming, that we need all this apparatus for, this security apparatus. There is going to be something to blame. It isn't going to be, oh well, we government let these same charlatans do the same thing over and over again to keep indebting the nation and drawing us further into debt. They're never going to come out and admit that. We will have some kind of an event that will be the cause of the next big financial crash. I mean, this is how we govern by crisis.
Unfortunately, we've learned the lesson over and over again. All we can do is focus on one another and protect ourselves.
Matt, always a pleasure to have you on here. I appreciate the hard work you do. Guys, please go over to his website and bookmark it and check out the action that him and his firm is taking. Matt Weidner, W-E-I-D-N-E-R, MattWeidnerLaw.com. Matt, thank you very much. We'll get you back on again next month.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Guys, stay tuned for Jeff Rintz. He is coming up next. Tomorrow night on the program, we're going to have, of course, Eric Lovely, hour number 1 with me. And then we're going to have Chris from Seeds Now. He's going to talk about planting. It is that time of year. We'll see you guys tomorrow, same time. Enjoy Jeff. He's coming up next. Peace.